Georgie and Mandy's first marriage. The real purpose of those visits to George's grave explained by producer. When Young Sheldon ended its 7-season run, one of the most emotional beats was the reminder of George Sir's absence and the ways his memory continued to shape the lives of his children. With the announcement of Georgie and Mandy's first marriage, a spin-off focusing on Sheldon's older brother and his wife navigating the chaos of young adulthood, many fans wondered whether George's legacy would continue to be felt. Recently, a producer revealed that the recurring visits to George's grave are not just sentimental flourishes, but intentional storytelling choices with a very specific purpose. The explanation sheds light not only on the show's emotional foundation, but also on why George Sr. remains a vital part of Georgie's life, even in a series where he will never appear on screen again. Carrying George's presence beyond Young Sheldon, George Sr. was one of the most complex figures in Young Sheldon. Often misunderstood, sometimes flawed, and yet deeply devoted to his family, his sudden death created a void that still echoes in The Big Bang Theory. For Georgie, who grew from a reckless teenager into a responsible father, that loss was transformative. The producer explained that the spin-off deliberately uses the graveyard visits as a way of keeping George present in the narrative. This isn't just about grief, the producer said. It's about Georgie's relationship with his father still shaping the choices he makes as a husband and father himself. In other words, George doesn't disappear with Young Sheldon. His influence carries forward, not as a memory of tragedy, but as an ongoing dialogue Georgie has with himself and with the audience about responsibility, family, and what it means to be a man in the Cooper family. A mirror for Georgie's growth. On the surface, Georgie's visits to George's grave may seem like background texture, a son showing respect to his late father. But the spin-off uses these moments as narrative checkpoints. Every time Georgie returns to that cemetery, it's tied to a decision point in his marriage with Mandy. When he doubts himself as a provider, he speaks to George about the burden of putting food on the table. When he struggles with parenting, he recalls how George balanced discipline and compassion. When he and Mandy fight, the grave becomes a silent confessional, a place to admit mistakes he doesn't yet have the courage to say aloud at home. This recurring ritual provides a mirror for Georgie's growth. It's less about what George would actually say and more about how Georgie interprets his father's example. By returning to the grave, Georgie measures his own progress against the lessons George left behind. A nod to fans who knew George's fate all along. For longtime viewers of The Big Bang Theory, George Sir's death has always been part of the Cooper family's history. Young Sheldon only deepened that awareness by humanizing the man beyond the anecdotes adult Sheldon shared. By showing Georgie's visits to his father's grave, the spin-off acknowledges that audience knowledge. It connects the dots between the teenage Georgie we last saw in Young Sheldon and the older, wiser Georgie whose offhand remarks about his dad in The Big Bang Theory carried hidden weight. The producer explained that these graveyard visits also serve as a bridge for the fandom. People loved George and Young Sheldon. We didn't want that to end abruptly. By letting Georgie return to his dad in these quiet, reflective scenes, we're saying George is still part of this story. He's still family. Mandy's perspective. A wife watching her husband heal. Interestingly, the spin-off doesn't just frame these visits from Georgie's perspective. Mandy's reactions are part of the story too. Mandy met George Sr. only briefly, but she's witnessed the hole his absence left in Georgie's heart. For her, these visits to the grave are a reminder that she married a man who's still learning how to fill his father's shoes. Sometimes she accompanies Georgie. Other times, she gives him space. The producer teased that this tension between Georgie needing his private connection to his father and Mandy wanting to share in his grief becomes one of the subtle arcs of their marriage. It's not about jealousy or rivalry, but about intimacy. Can Mandy be enough of a partner to hold the weight George once carried for Georgie? A way to talk about fatherhood without preaching. Television often struggles to depict fatherhood without slipping into cliché. But the Georgie and Mandy spin-off sidesteps this by framing fatherhood as a conversation across generations. George's grave is the device that allows Georgie to process fatherhood out loud. Instead of lectures or heavy-handed monologues, audiences get intimate, vulnerable scenes of a young dad trying to figure it out in dialogue with a silent father who can't answer back. It's not only authentic, but also dramatically compelling. The graveyard becomes a stage for Georgie's inner monologues, his doubts, and his triumphs. Each visit is less about resolution and more about reflection, mirroring the way real-life parenting rarely offers neat answers. Honoring George's complexity. One of the dangers of writing a deceased character into a spin-off is flattening them into a saintly memory. But the producers are careful to avoid that. In Georgie's reflections, George isn't always perfect. Georgie sometimes resents the advice he imagines his father giving. He remembers fights, mistakes, and shortcomings. The grave is not just a place of reverence, but also of honesty. This balance ensures that George remains a fully realized character, not a myth. By letting Georgie wrestle with both admiration and frustration, the show honors the complexity that made George such a beloved part of young Sheldon. The graveyard as a symbol of continuity. Beyond the emotional resonance, there's also symbolic weight to the graveyard itself. It becomes a visual metaphor for continuity across generations of Coopers. For Georgie, standing at his father's grave is not just about mourning, it's about planting his own roots. His daughter, Cece, represents the future. George's grave represents the past. Georgie, caught in the middle, becomes the bridge between them. The producer described it beautifully. When Georgie stands at that grave, he's both his father's son and his daughter's father. That's the circle of the show. Fan reactions. The catharsis of seeing George remembered. Fans have already speculated online about how the spin-off will handle George's absence. Many were relieved to hear the confirmation that he won't be forgotten. One fan wrote, "It broke my heart when George died in young Sheldon. I'm glad they're not pretending like it didn't change everything. Watching Georgie honor him will make the new show feel connected to what came before." Another commented, "I think it's important for Georgie to have that touchstone. Without George, he could have gone down a darker path. Seeing him still seek his dad's guidance shows how far he's come." Clearly, the producers tapped into something powerful, a way of giving fans catharsis while also enriching Georgie's character development. Why this storytelling choice matters. Ultimately, the recurring grave visits do more than add emotional depth. They establish the thematic backbone of Georgie and Mandy's first marriage. The show isn't just about young love, financial struggles, or the chaos of parenting. It's about legacy. It's about how the people who came before shaped the choices we make today, and how we pass those lessons to the next generation. George may be gone, but his presence ensures the spin-off never loses its roots in young Sheldon. Just as Sheldon carries his father's shadow in The Big Bang Theory, Georgie carries it here, only this time, the story gives us access to his healing process in real time. Conclusion: a grave that holds more than grief. By explaining the purpose of Georgie's visits to George's grave, the